The signal came through on a Tuesday morning, cutting through the usual static that filled the deep space monitoring station. Lieutenant Maya Santos was halfway through her coffee when the computer started screaming. Every alert system in the facility lit up at once, flashing red and yellow warnings across a dozen screens. She dropped her cup and ran to the main console. Her hands moved across the keyboard, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. The signal was weak, breaking apart every few seconds, but it was definitely artificial. Someone out there was trying to talk to them. Maya's supervisor, Dr. Richard Hayes, came rushing into the room. He was an older man with gray hair and tired eyes, but right now those eyes were wide with excitement. He had spent 30 years listening to the stars, hoping for a moment like this. "Is it real?" he asked, his voice shaking slightly. Maya ran the signal through every test she knew. She checked for equipment malfunction, solar interference, satellite echoes. Nothing. The signal was coming from deep space, from a point 30 light-years away. "It was real, it's real," she whispered. "We're not alone." Within hours, the signal was being analyzed by every major space agency on Earth. Teams of linguists, mathematicians, and scientists worked around the clock to decode the message. The aliens, whoever they were, had done something clever. They had encoded basic mathematical concepts into the signal, creating a kind of universal translator key. It took 3 days to decrypt the full message. What they found made the entire world hold its breath. The message was from a species called the Villani. Their world was under attack. A powerful empire called the Krath Dominion was destroying their civilization, planet by planet. The Villani had sent distress signals in every direction, hoping that anyone would hear them and help. They included coordinates to their homeworld. They included scans of the Krath ships and weapons. They included one final plea: "We are dying. If anyone can hear this, please help us. We have no one else." The message reached the United Earth Fleet Command in Geneva on a cold November afternoon. Admiral Patricia Cole sat in her office, reading the decoded message for the 5th time. She was a tall woman with sharp features and silver hair pulled back in a tight bun. She had commanded fleets in 3 different regional conflicts and had never lost a ship under her command. But this was different. This was not a conflict between nations or a dispute over resources. This was first contact with alien life, and it came with an impossible request. Her assistant knocked on the door. "Captain Morrison is here, ma'am." "Send him in." Captain Jake Morrison walked into the office with the confident stride of a man who had spent his entire adult life in space. He was in his early 40s with dark hair starting to gray at the temples, and the kind of calm eyes that inspired trust. He had commanded the Dauntless for 2 years, and his crew would follow him anywhere. Patricia gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Sit down, Jake. We need to talk about something that is going to change everything." She handed him a tablet with the Villani message. Jake read it slowly, his expression never changing. When he finished, he looked up at her. "When do we leave?" Patricia almost smiled. That was Jake Morrison in a nutshell. No hesitation, no questions about the odds or the danger. Just a simple acceptance of what needed to be done. "The Security Council is meeting tomorrow," she said. "Some members want to ignore the message. They think getting involved will make Earth a target. They want to stay hidden and hope the Krath never find us." Jake set the tablet down carefully. "And what do you think, Admiral?" Patricia stood and walked to the window. Outside she could see the lights of Geneva spreading out into the distance. 7 billion people all living their lives, unaware that humanity's place in the universe was about to change forever. "I think we are being given a choice," she said quietly. "We can hide and hope we are never found. Or we can stand up and show the galaxy what humanity is made of. I think we should help them." "So do I," Jake said. The meeting the next day was long and heated. Politicians and military leaders argued for hours. Some wanted to send a diplomatic mission. Some wanted to do nothing. Some wanted to gather more information before making any decision. Admiral Cole listened to all of them. Then she stood up and spoke in a voice that cut through all the arguments. "The Villani are dying while we debate. Every hour we wait, more of them die. We have spent decades building ships and weapons for a threat we were not sure existed. Now we know the threat is real. Now we know there are people out there who need our help. I say we use what we have built. I say we send the Dauntless." There was silence in the room. Then slowly, one by one, the council members voted. It was not unanimous, but it did not need to be. The decision was made. Earth would answer the Villani plea. They would send their most advanced warship, their best crew, and a message of their own. Humanity does not abandon those who cry out for help. Jake assembled his crew in the dauntless hangar bay the next morning. 300 men and women, all volunteers, all knowing they might not come back. He stood on a platform where everyone could see him and spoke without notes. You all know why we are here. You have all read the message. The Villani are strangers to us. We do not know what they look like. We do not know their culture or their history. But we know they are in trouble and we know they asked for help. He paused, looking at the faces of his crew. He saw Lieutenant Sophie Grant, his tactical officer, standing at attention with her usual serious expression. He saw Chief Engineer Ryan Cooper grinning despite the gravity of the moment. He saw Maya Santos, who had been the first to hear the signal and had requested transfer to the Dauntless immediately. 30 light-years away, people are dying. Their world is burning. They sent a message into the darkness, hoping someone would hear it and care enough to do something. We heard it, and we are going to do something about it. We are going to show them and everyone else out there that humanity stands for something. We stand for those who cannot stand for themselves. The crew erupted in cheers. Jake let them cheer for a moment, then raised his hand for silence. This will not be easy. The Krath fleet is powerful and we are just one ship, but I have faith in every single one of you. I have faith in this ship, and I have faith that when the history of humanity's first contact with alien life is written, it will say that we answered the call with courage and fire. The Dauntless launched the next morning, tearing through Earth's atmosphere and into the black. Behind them, 7 billion people watched and waited. Ahead of them, 30 light-years away, the Villani kept fighting and hoping that help would come. The Dauntless cut through space like a knife through water, powered by Earth's most advanced quantum drive. The technology was still experimental, tested only a handful of times before this mission. But it worked. The ship covered distances that would take conventional vessels decades, folding space around itself in ways that made regular physics seem like polite suggestions rather than laws. 3 weeks. That was how long the journey would take. 3 weeks to prepare for a battle against an enemy that had already conquered dozens of star systems. 3 weeks to figure out how one human ship could make a difference against impossible odds. Lieutenant Sophie Grant spent almost every waking hour in the tactical center. She was a woman in her mid-30s with short blonde hair and gray eyes that never seemed to blink during combat drills. Her crew called her ice behind her back, not because she was cold, but because nothing ever seemed to shake her calm. She studied the Krath tactics obsessively. The Villani had included detailed scans of their encounters with the Dominion, and Sophie analyzed every battle, every maneuver, every weapon pattern. The Krath fought with overwhelming force and brutal efficiency. They surrounded their targets, cut off escape routes, and hammered them with coordinated fire until nothing remained. They fight like machines, she told Jake during one of their daily briefings. Everything is calculated, predictable. They have standard formations for every scenario. Jake leaned back in his chair. Predictable can be good for us. Predictable means we can anticipate their moves. Sophie nodded slowly. But their predictability comes from the fact that their standard tactics work. They have never needed to adapt because nobody has ever made them. Then we will be the first, Jake said simply. Sophie spent the next week developing strategies that relied on everything the Krath would not expect. Rapid course changes, erratic flight patterns, weapons fired from unexpected angles. She designed maneuvers that would make any traditional military commander call her insane. But Jake trusted her completely. Down in engineering, Chief Engineer Ryan Cooper was performing his own kind of magic. Ryan was a genius with machines. The kind of person who could look at a broken engine and know exactly what was wrong just by listening to it. He was short and stocky, with permanently oil-stained hands and a smile that suggested he knew something nobody else did. Gathered his engineering team around the Dauntless's main systems and gave them a speech that would have given the ship's designer's heart. Attacks. Everything on this ship was built with safety margins and backup systems, he said, which means everything on this ship can be pushed harder than the specs say. We are going to modify, improve, and generally break all the rules. His team loved it. They worked 18-hour shifts, reconfiguring systems and testing new ideas. Ryan modified the plasma cannons to fire in rapid bursts instead of single shots. He reconfigured the shield generators so they could create temporary zones of overcharge protection, buying them a few crucial seconds during an attack. He even found a way to weaponize the ship's waste heat, channeling it into a directed energy pulse. Will it work? His second-in-command asked, looking at the schematics with doubt. Ryan grinned. Only one way to find out. Meanwhile, Maya Santos worked in the communications center, maintaining contact with the Villani. The conversations were difficult. The distance made real-time communication impossible, and the messages had to be compressed and encoded to get through. But slowly, they built a picture of what was happening. The Villani were a peaceful species. They had no military tradition, no weapons, no understanding of warfare. When the Krath had arrived, they had tried diplomacy first. Then they had tried fleeing. Then they had tried hiding. Nothing had worked. The Krath were not interested in negotiation or coexistence. They wanted the Villani worlds, and they were willing to exterminate the current inhabitants to get them. 3 colony worlds had already fallen. The Villani homeworld was next. The Krath fleet had arrived 2 weeks ago and began a systematic bombardment. The Villani were evacuating people to underground shelters, but everyone knew it was only a matter of time. Maya read the messages and felt her heart break a little more with each one. These were desperate people, watching their civilization die, clinging to the hope that someone had heard their call for help. She brought the messages to Jake every morning. He read each one carefully, never rushing, never dismissing the fears and hopes of people he had never met. "Tell them we are coming," he said one morning. "Tell them to hold on just a little longer." Maya sent the message, knowing it would take hours to reach the Villani. She wondered what they would think when they learned that help was coming from a species they had never heard of, aboard a single ship against a fleet of hundreds. The crew settled into a routine during the journey. They trained, they prepared, they maintained the ship, but they also talked. In the mess hall, in the corridors, in the quiet moments before sleep, they talked about why they were doing this. Nobody had forced them to volunteer. They could have stayed on Earth safe and comfortable, but they had all chosen to come. Some did it for adventure. Some did it because they believed in helping others. Some did it because they wanted to prove that humanity deserved a place among the stars. Jake walked the ship constantly, talking to his crew, listening to their concerns, making sure everyone knew they were valued. He found Ryan in engineering one night, covered in grease and still tinkering with something. "You should get some sleep," Jake said. Ryan did not look up from his work. "I will sleep when we get there. Right now I need to make sure this ship can take a beating and keep fighting." "It will," Jake said confidently. Ryan finally looked up, his expression serious. "Captain, I have run the numbers. The Krath fleet has more firepower than anything humanity has ever built. If we go ship to ship with them in a straight fight, we lose." "We lose badly," Jake nodded. "Good thing we are not going to fight fair then." As they approached Villani space, the mood on the ship changed. The training became more intense. The jokes stopped. Everyone knew that in a few days they would face the greatest test of their lives. Jake called Sophie and Ryan to his quarters for a final strategy meeting. They sat around a holographic display showing the Villani system and what they knew about the Krath positions. "They outnumber us 50 to 1, Sophie said flatly. "We cannot win a sustained engagement." "We are not trying to win," Jake replied. "We are trying to buy time for the Villani to evacuate. We hit them hard, create chaos, and give the civilians a chance to escape." Ryan pulled up the ship's systems display. "I can give you 3, maybe 4 full-power attacks before we need to cycle the weapons. After that, we will be vulnerable." "Then we make those attacks count," Jake said. They planned late into the night, going over every scenario they could think of. When they finally finished, Sophie looked at Jake with an expression that might have been respect or might have been concern. "This plan is completely insane," she said. Jake smiled. "That is what I am counting on." The Dauntless dropped out of quantum space at the edge of the Villani system 3 weeks after leaving Earth. The crew moved to battle stations silently, efficiently. Every person knew their job. Every system was ready. Jake sat in the captain's chair, watching the sensor displays light up as they scanned the system ahead. What they saw was worse than they had feared. The Krath fleet was massive, and the bombardment of the Villani homeworld was already well underway. But Jake did not hesitate. He looked around the bridge at his crew, at the people who had trusted him enough to fly into hell itself. "All hands," he said over the ship-wide channel. "This is it. Remember your training. Trust each other. And let us show these Krath what happens when they threaten innocent people in a universe where humanity exists." The Dauntless began its attack run, and the Battle of Villani Prime began. The Dauntless went dark the moment it entered the Villani system. All external lights shut off. The engines throttled down to minimum power. The ship became a ghost, sliding through the darkness using only passive sensors to navigate. Jake stood on the bridge, watching the tactical display with steady eyes. The Krath fleet was spread across the system in a formation that looked like a net. Their flagship, a massive vessel called the Bloodfire, sat at the center like a spider waiting in its web. Smaller ships formed a blockade around the Villani homeworld, while heavy cruisers bombarded the surface. Sophie stood at her station, her fingers moving across the controls as she analyzed the enemy positions. 15 heavy cruisers, 32 destroyers, and that flagship. Conservative estimate is they have 20 times our firepower. 30 times if you include the flagship's main cannon, Ryan added from engineering. His voice came through the comm system, calm despite what they were facing. Jake studied the display for another moment, then made his decision. They could not win a straight fight. They could not destroy the entire Krath fleet, but they could do something the Krath would never expect from a single ship. They could attack. Take us through the asteroid field, Jake ordered. Plot a course that brings us out behind that destroyer group on the western flank. The pilot, a young woman named Kelly Barnes, nodded and adjusted their course. The Dauntless slipped through the field like a shadow, using the spinning rocks as cover. On the tactical display, they could see the Krath ships continuing their bombardment, completely unaware that death was sliding up behind them. Range to target? Jake asked. 60,000 kilometers in closing, Sophie replied. They still have not detected us. Ryan, how are the weapons? Plasma cannons charged and ready. The modified firing sequence is loaded. We will get one good shot before they know what hit them. Jake watched the range counter tick down. 50,000 kilometers, 40,000. At 30,000 he gave the order. Light them up. The Dauntless came alive. Engines roared to full power. Running lights blazed on, and every sensor on the ship locked onto the nearest Krath destroyer, painting it with targeting lasers that the enemy could not possibly miss. On the Krath destroyer, alarms started screaming. The crew barely had time to react before the Dauntless fired. The plasma cannons unleashed a stream of superheated hell. Humanity had designed these weapons to fight enemies they could only imagine, and they had not held back. The burst tore through space and slammed into the destroyer's shields, overwhelming them in seconds. The second burst punched through the hull armor like it was made of paper. The third burst hit something critical inside the ship, and the destroyer exploded in a ball of expanding fire. Target destroyed, Sophie reported, her voice completely calm. Multiple enemy ships changing course to intercept us. Here they come, Jake said. Kelly, get us moving. Random evasion pattern. Do not let them predict where we will be. The Dauntless accelerated hard, throwing everyone against their restraints. Kelly flew the ship like she was dancing, spinning and weaving through space in patterns that made no tactical sense and were therefore impossible to predict. The Krath ships tried to track them, but their targeting computers could not keep up with the erratic movements. Sophie called out targets as they appeared on her screens. Cruiser at 4 o'clock. Destroyer coming up from below. Another cruiser trying to flank us. Ryan, power to forward cannons, Jake ordered. You got it, Captain. The Dauntless spun to face the cruiser and fired. The heavy Krath ship staggered under the impact, its shields flaring bright enough to light up the darkness of space. Sophie launched missiles while the shields were down and the cruiser began venting atmosphere. But the Krath were adapting. More ships were breaking formation and converging on the Dauntless. They were starting to box the human ship in, cutting off escape routes and creating overlapping fields of fire. Captain, we have got a problem, Sophie said. They are trying to surround us. If they succeed, we will not be able to dodge all their fire. Jake saw it too. The Krath were good at this. They had done it 1,000 times before to 1,000 other victims. The Dauntless was fast and unpredictable, but it was still just one ship. Eventually, the weight of numbers would tell. Ryan, how long until we can use the lance? There was a pause on the other end of the comm. The weapon is experimental, Captain. If something goes wrong, it could tear the ship apart. How long? Jake repeated. 90 seconds. But you need to get us close to a big target. The lance has limited range. Jake looked at the tactical display. The Krath flagship sat in the center of the formation, directing the battle. It was massive, heavily armed and protected by shields that could probably withstand a nuclear blast. It was also exactly where they needed to go. Sophie plot an intercept course for the Bloodfire. Full speed. She turned to look at him, her gray eyes showing surprise for the first time since the battle started. Captain, that ship is 10 times our size. Its main cannon could cut us in half. Then we will have to make sure it does not get the chance. Kelly, take us in! The Dauntless turned and burned hard toward the heart of the Krath fleet. Every enemy ship in range opened fire. The space around them filled with plasma bolts, missiles, and energy beams. The ship's shields flared continuously, taking hit after hit. Shields at 60%, Ryan reported. 50%. Captain, we are taking a lot of damage. Hull breach on Deck 7, someone called out. Sealing emergency doors. Medical teams to Deck 7, Maya added, coordinating the damage control efforts from her station. The Dauntless shuddered under the impacts, but Kelly kept it flying. She dodged what she could and took what she had to, always pushing forward toward the flagship. The Krath could not understand what they were seeing. One small ship, charging directly at their most powerful vessel, taking damage that should have destroyed it already. The Bloodfire finally reacted. Its main cannon, a weapon designed to crack planets, began charging. Energy built up in a glowing array at the front of the massive ship, bright enough to hurt the eyes. They are targeting us with their main weapon, Sophie said. Impact in 30 seconds. Ryan, please tell me that lance is ready, Jake said. 20 seconds, Captain. You need to get us closer. Jake felt time slow down. The Bloodfire's main cannon was almost charged. The Dauntless was still taking fire from a dozen other ships. His crew was bleeding and dying in sections of the ship that were open to space, and he was asking them to fly even closer to the enemy. But he also knew that if they turned away now, the Villani would die. Every civilian still trapped on that planet below would die, and humanity's first contact with alien life would be remembered as the time they ran away. Kelly, emergency acceleration. Everything the engines have. The Dauntless surged forward. The distance to the Bloodfire dropped rapidly. 10,000 kilometers. 8,000. 6,000. Lance ready? Ryan called out. Fire. Jake shouted. The Dauntless released a focused nuclear detonation directly into a stream of superheated plasma. The result was something no species had ever weaponized before. A lance of pure destruction crossed the space between the ships in an instant. The Bloodfire's shields tried to stop it. They failed. The lance punched through the shields, through the armor, through the internal structure of the massive ship. It carved a burning line from bow to stern, and the flagship, the pride of the Krath Dominion, broke in half. The explosion lit up the entire system. The two halves of the Bloodfire tumbled away from each other, secondary explosions rippling through the wreckage. The Krath fleet, its command ship destroyed, fell into chaos. On the bridge of the Dauntless, the crew sat in stunned silence. Then someone started cheering, and the cheer spread through the ship like wildfire. But Jake was already looking at the sensor displays. The Krath fleet was in disarray, but they were not defeated. There were still dozens of ships out there, and now they were angry. Do not celebrate yet, he said quietly. Sophie, pick targets. Ryan, get me damage reports. Maya, contact the Villani. Tell them to start evacuating now. This is their chance. The Battle of Villani Prime was not over. It was just beginning. The destruction of the Bloodfire sent shockwaves through the Krath fleet. For 10 long seconds, every enemy ship simply stopped, as if the commanders could not believe what they had just witnessed. Their flagship, the vessel that had conquered systems and broken fleets, was gone, destroyed by a single shot from a ship they had never seen before. But the Krath had not conquered half the galaxy by being weak. The moment of shock passed and fury took its place. Captain, we have got multiple contacts breaking formation, Sophie called out. They are all heading toward us. All of them. Jake watched the tactical display fill with red icons, each one representing a Krath warship. They were converging from every direction, abandoning their bombardment of the planet to focus entirely on the Dauntless. It was exactly what he had hoped for. Maya, status on the Villani evacuation. Maya's fingers flew across her console. They are launching transports now. Every ship they have, but it will take time to get everyone off the surface. Then we buy them that time. Sophie, continue engaging targets. Ryan, how bad is the damage? Ryan's voice came through the comm, and for the first time he sounded worried. Not good, Captain. We have got hull breaches on 6 decks. Life support is failing in sections B and C. The shields are down to 30% and dropping. The lance is completely burned out, and the main engines are running hot. We push them much harder and they might fail. How long can we keep fighting? There was a pause. Honestly, I have no idea. We are already past what the ship was designed to handle. Jake made his decision quickly. They could not run. They could not hide. Their only option was to keep fighting and hope it was enough. All hands, this is the captain. The Villani are evacuating their people right now. Every minute we keep the Krath focused on us is another minute those civilians have to escape. We are going to hold this position and make the enemy work for every meter of space. I know the ship is damaged. I know you are tired. But I also know that every single person on this crew is exactly where they need to be. Let us finish what we started. The crew responded with determination. Damage control teams worked frantically to seal hull breaches and restore systems. Medical teams treated the wounded where they fell. And on the bridge, Sophie began calling out targets with machine precision. Destroyer approaching from port side. Range 4,000 kilometers. Fire, Jake ordered. The plasma cannons, modified by Ryan to fire in rapid bursts, hammered the destroyer. The Krath ship's shields held for the first volley, flickered on the second, and collapsed on the third. The fourth volley tore into the hull and the destroyer went tumbling away, venting fire and debris. Cruiser lining up for a shot. Starboard side. Kelly, hard turn. Get us out of its firing arc. The Dauntless spun away from the cruiser's main guns, but two other ships had predicted the move. They fired from opposite sides, catching the human ship in a crossfire. The shields flared and buckled. Warning alarms screamed across the bridge. Shields failing, Sophie reported. Hull damage on multiple decks. Rerouting power from secondary systems, Ryan called out. Shields back to 20%. That is the best I can do. Jake felt the ship shudder under the impacts. Every hit was like a physical blow. But the Dauntless kept fighting. It dodged, weaved, and fired back at every opportunity. Sophie coordinated the point defense systems to intercept incoming missiles. Kelly flew patterns that should have been impossible. And Jake held them all together with calm orders and absolute faith. But they were losing. Slowly, inevitably, they were losing. Captain, we have got 3 cruisers moving to box us in, Sophie said. If they complete that formation, we will not be able to escape. Then we do not let them complete it. Target the lead cruiser. Full power to the cannons. The Dauntless turned to face the approaching cruiser and unleashed everything it had. The enemy ship staggered under the assault, but its shields held. It fired back and the Dauntless took more hits. More alarms. More damage reports. Fire on deck 4, someone called out, spreading to adjacent compartments. Medical emergency on deck 9. Multiple casualties. Engineering, I need more power to the shields, Jake said. I am trying, Captain, Ryan responded. But we are running on fumes here. The reactor is overheating. The weapons are drawing too much power. Something has to give. Jake looked at the tactical display. The Villani transports were still launching, but too slowly. They needed more time. Just a little more time, and then Sophie said something that changed everything. Captain, I have an idea. It is completely insane, but it might work. Jake almost smiled. Tell me. We still have a full load of missiles. All of them. We have been saving them for emergencies, but I think this qualifies. If we launch all of them at once in a saturation pattern, we can overwhelm the point defense systems of those cruisers. The blast radius will be huge. It might even take out multiple ships. It will also leave us with no missiles for the rest of the battle. Jake pointed out. We will not survive the rest of the battle if we do not do something now, Sophie replied bluntly. Jake considered for exactly 2 seconds. Do it. Sophie programmed the firing solution with the speed of someone who had run this scenario 1,000 times in simulations. Her fingers danced across the controls, setting trajectories and detonation timings. When she was satisfied, she looked up at Jake. Missiles ready. All 144 of them. Fire. The Dauntless released its entire missile complement in a single massive salvo. 144 warheads streaked away from the ship, splitting into dozens of trajectories designed to converge on the Krath cruisers from every possible angle. The Krath point defense systems opened fire immediately. Lasers and interceptor missiles filled the space between the ships, trying to shoot down the incoming threat. They got some of them. They got a lot of them. But there were simply too many coming from too many directions. The first missiles reached their targets and detonated. Then more. Then all of them in a cascading wave of explosions that lit up the darkness like a new sun being born. When the light faded, Two of the three cruisers were gone, simply erased from existence. The third was drifting, its engines dead and its hull torn open. The crew of the Dauntless cheered, but Jake was already looking at the next threat. More Krath ships were approaching, smaller vessels faster, designed for close-range combat, and the Dauntless had no missiles left. "How many transports have launched?" Jake asked Maya. 70% of the civilian population is off the planet. They need another 10 minutes to get the rest. 10 minutes. It might as well have been 10 hours. The Dauntless was falling apart. The shields were barely functional. The hull had more holes than armor, and the Krath kept coming. "Captain, the reactor is critical," Ryan said. "If we take many more hits, we might lose main power entirely." Jake looked around the bridge. His crew was exhausted, wounded, pushed beyond anything they had trained for. But not one of them suggested retreat. Not one of them suggested abandoning the Villani. He made one final decision. Take us between the planet and the Krath fleet. Position us directly in their line of fire. Sophie turned to stare at him. "Captain, that will make us a stationary target. They will tear us apart." "Yes," Jake said quietly. "But they will have to go through us to get to those transports, and we are going to make them pay for every second." The Dauntless moved into position, placing itself between the Villani homeworld and the approaching Krath ships. It was a shield, a wall made of metal and human determination, and when the Krath opened fire, the human ship stood firm. The battle became a nightmare of fire and pain. The Dauntless took hit after hit, each one tearing away pieces of the ship, each one killing or wounding crew members who had become like family. But Ryan kept the engines running. Sophie kept the weapons firing, and Jake kept his crew fighting. On the planet below, the last transports lifted off, filled with Villani civilians who looked up at the burning human ship that had given them a chance to survive. "All transports are clear," Maya reported, her voice thick with emotion. "They are requesting permission to help us." "Negative," Jake said. "Tell them to run. Get those people to safety." The Dauntless began to move away from the planet slowly, painfully. It had done its job. The Villani were safe. Now it just had to survive long enough to tell Earth what humanity had accomplished. The Dauntless limped away from Villani Prime, trailing debris and atmosphere. Half the ship was open to space. Fires burned in compartments that had lost life support. The shields were completely gone. But the engines still functioned, barely, and that was enough. Jake sat in the captain's chair, his uniform torn and blood-stained. A piece of shrapnel from an exploded console had cut his arm, but he had refused to leave the bridge for medical attention. Around him, his crew worked with the exhausted determination of people who had given everything and somehow found a little more to give. "Status of the Krath fleet?" he asked. Sophie checked her damaged sensors. Half her displays were dead, and she had to piece together information from what remained. "They are regrouping. We destroyed or disabled 15 of their ships. The rest are confused. They keep trying to re-establish command structure, but without the bloodfire, they do not know who is in charge. That confusion is the only reason we are still alive," Ryan added over the comm. His voice was hoarse from shouting orders to his engineering teams. "Captain, we need to jump out of here soon. The quantum drive is damaged, but I think I can get one more jump out of it. Maybe. But if we wait much longer, we will be stuck here." Jake looked at the tactical display one more time. The Villani transports were clear, heading toward the outer system where they could make their own jumps to safety. The Krath fleet was scattered, angry, but no longer an immediate threat. They had done what they came to do. "Maya, send a final message to the Villani. Tell them good luck. Tell them humanity will remember them." Maya worked her damaged console, routing power from failing systems to get the message out. When she confirmed it was sent, Jake gave the order. "Ryan, get us out of here. Take us home." "Initiating quantum drive," Ryan replied. "Everyone hold on. This is going to be rough." The Dauntless began to fold space around itself, but something was wrong. The ship shuddered violently. Alarms blared. The jump was not smooth like it should be. Instead, reality seemed to twist and tear around them in ways that hurt to see. "Drive is failing," Ryan shouted. "I am trying to compensate, but the damage is too severe. We are going to make the jump, but we are going to feel every second of it." The ship lurched sideways through dimensions that human minds were not meant to perceive. Crew members grabbed onto anything solid as the artificial gravity fluctuated wildly. The lights flickered. The hull groaned under stresses it was never designed to handle. And then, suddenly, they were through. The Dauntless dropped back into normal space, light years away from the Vellani system. The quantum drive immediately shut down, burned out beyond any hope of repair. "Status report," Jake called out. The reports came in slowly, as each department assessed the damage. When they were compiled, the picture was grim. The ship had lost 47 crew members. Another 100 were wounded, some critically. Major systems were offline or barely functioning. They had no shields, no missiles, limited weapons, and no way to make another quantum jump. But they were alive. Against odds that should have been impossible, they had survived. "How long to reach Earth on conventional engines?" Jake asked. Ryan did the math. "At our current speed with the damage to the engines? 18 months. Maybe longer. 18 months. A year and a half of limping through space in a damaged ship, hoping nothing else went wrong." Jake should have been discouraged. Instead, he felt a strange sense of peace. They had done the impossible. Everything else was just details. "All hands, this is the captain," he said over the ship-wide channel. "We are going home. It is going to take a while, but we are going home. And we are bringing with us a story that the entire galaxy is going to hear. Today, humanity answered a call for help. Today, we stood against an empire and did not back down. Today, we showed the universe what we are made of. I am proud of every single one of you." The journey back to Earth became its own kind of test. Ryan and his engineering teams worked miracles every day, keeping the ship functioning with systems that should have failed long ago. The medical teams treated the wounded with limited supplies, performing surgeries in compartments that were never meant to be operating rooms. And the crew supported each other, sharing food when rations ran low, telling stories to keep spirits up and never giving up hope. Maya established contact with Earth after the first week. The transmission was weak and delayed, but it was enough. She sent a full report of what had happened at Vellani Prime, including sensor logs and tactical data. The response from Earth was immediate and overwhelming. The news spread across the planet in hours. Humanity had made first contact, and it had done so by saving an entire civilization from extinction. The crew of the Dauntless became instant heroes. Their names were spoken in every language on Earth. But the response from the rest of the galaxy was even more significant. The Vellani sent messages of thanks and remembrance to every species they had contact with. They told the story of the human ship that had faced impossible odds and won. They told the story of Captain Jake Morrison and his crew of legends. Other species heard the story and began to look at the small blue planet differently. Humanity had announced its presence not with threats or demands, but with action and sacrifice. Explorers and diplomats from a dozen different civilizations began making plans to visit Earth. And the Krath Dominion, the empire that had seemed unstoppable, began to withdraw from several border systems. The loss of their flagship and 15 other ships to a single enemy vessel had shaken their confidence. For the first time in generations, other species realized the Krath could be beaten. The Dauntless finally reached Earth orbit 16 months after leaving Vellani Prime. The ship was a wreck, held together more by hope than by engineering, but it flew home under its own power, and that was what mattered. Admiral Patricia Cole met them at the orbital shipyard. She stood at attention as the crew disembarked, saluting each one personally. When Jake stepped off the ship, she broke protocol and hugged him. "You did it," she said quietly. "You crazy son of a gun, you actually did it." Jake looked back at the Dauntless, at the scorched and battered hull that had carried them through hell and back. "The ship did it. The crew did it. I just pointed them in the right direction." The celebrations lasted for weeks. There were parades, ceremonies, and awards. Every member of the crew received the highest honors Earth could give. But for Jake and his crew, the best moment came when they received a message from the Vellani. The message was simple. It showed Vellani families alive and safe, rebuilding their civilization on new worlds. It showed children playing, people working, life continuing because the Dauntless had given them a chance. And it ended with 5 words that would be remembered forever. "Thank you for answering our call." Jake stood on the observation deck of the rebuilt shipyard, looking down at Earth. Sophie joined him, then Ryan, then Maya. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching their homeworld spin slowly in the darkness. "They are already building a new ship," Sophie said. "The Defiant. Bigger, faster, more weapons. They asked me to be the tactical officer. They asked me to design the engines," Ryan added. "Said they want someone who knows how to break the rules. And they want me to run first contact protocols," Maya said. Apparently there are a lot of species that want to talk to us now. They all looked at Jake. He smiled slightly. They offered me a desk job. Admiral Morrison has a nice ring to it. He paused. I turned them down. I am taking command of the Defiant. Because if there is one thing I learned out there, it is that the galaxy needs people who will answer when someone calls for help, and humanity has a lot of answers to give. Far across the galaxy, in 1,000 different star systems, people of 100 different species heard the story of the human ship. They heard about the Dauntless and its crew. They heard about the Battle of Villani Prime, and they learned a new word, a human word that captured something fundamental about the species from the small blue planet: hope. Humanity had come to the stars, and they had brought hope with them. Hope that good people existed, hope that someone would answer when you called for help, hope that even in the darkest moments there were those who would stand and fight. The Krath Dominion learned a different lesson. They learned that there was a new power in the galaxy, one that did not conquer or dominate, one that protected and defended, and they learned that if they threatened innocent lives, they would face the fire and fury of humanity. The Dauntless was eventually restored and placed in a museum on Earth, a monument to the day humanity announced its presence to the universe. But the real legacy was not in the ship or the battle. It was in the message that echoed across the stars. Humanity is here, and when you call for help, we will answer with legends and fire.